Hello, everyone, and welcome to my final Richard Lehman book retrospective ranking. It's no surprise here if you know who Richard Lehman is. Most people who have guessed what my number one book would have been by the virtue that I've covered the other 36 books, I think. And if you didn't, well, this cover gives it away, doesn't it? My number one ranking for Richard Lehman is Savage from 1993. First of all, that cover, that colour scheme, there's something about the purple writing there. This is a later edition, but there's something about this painting here. It's incredibly evocative of the mood. We've got the knife, the rattlesnake, the mountains. There's something incredibly picturesque about that, and it's just my absolute favourite cover. It's not necessarily his best. I think Amara, if you look at the back of Amara, has one of his most detailed pictures, but that is just, there's something about it. Savage is a standalone work for Richard Lehman. It's unlike anything else he ever penned. I believe his editor at the time wanted him to try a book with some set in England, or at least starting off in England, and do something a little different. And of all the books that Lehman's wrote, this is the one that he said he wants to be remembered for. In an interview in the 90s, he said this, above all other books, was the one that he wanted people to remember him by. It's a decent sized book. It weighs in at about 470 pages, but more than 470 pages, doesn't matter where you turn in the book. The writing here is far denser than in anything else. The margins are a lot smaller. There's a lot more words per page here than in any book that Lehman's ever wrote before. So whilst this isn't as big as like Quake in terms of page count, in terms of word count, this is far longer. I would say this and The Midnight Tour are Lehman's biggest books. Midnight Tour has significantly more pages than this, but the writing here, I wouldn't be surprised, if somebody actually counted up the words, that this was Lehman's biggest book, simply because of how small the writing is and how much more wording is there per page. So it's a dense novel, and it's set over a much longer period of time than anything Lehman's wrote. Most of Lehman's books, excuse me, most of Lehman's books are set over a period of days or sometimes weeks, sometimes hours. This is set over a period of months. I think about 9 months pass, which gives Lehman the opportunity to paint a world and world building and seasons and picture and colour them in a way that he's never done before, because Lehman wasn't really, Lehman didn't concentrate much on world building, and he didn't write a lot of scenery. Here he absolutely does. He describes the environments, the world, the landscapes brilliantly. And like I say, in a way that he's never done in any other book. This book starts off in England in the late 1800s and then moves over, like I say, over a period of about 9 months to America, North America, and we get, well, like I say, different seasons. And it stars a character called Trevor Bentley, who is a 15-year-old boy. It's told from the first person. So if you've read any of other Richard Lehman books, and you're aware of the fact that his first person books, especially about male characters, are notoriously unpleasant. Trevor Bentley is unlike any of those other characters, because despite the fact that he's 15, which I think is makes him Richard Lehman's youngest protagonist, he's the most mature, sensible, likeable 15-year-old that Lehman ever wrote about. He's one of Lehman's very best characters, a thoroughly nuanced, fleshed out 3D human being whose mannerisms and behaviour feel real. And he goes on this journey of self-discovery throughout the course of this book and just becomes an even better human being by the end of it. What I really like about it is how his relationships with various characters form and feel natural. He actually falls in love not once but twice over the course of this story. Both female characters are great characters, very well defined, and the relationships he forms are believable and have space and room to grow. It's not just about people instantly falling in love and having nothing in common but sex. There's so much more to it here. It's genuinely shocking how different this feels to anything else that Lehman's wrote. Now, if you listen to this and you think, oh, this doesn't sound like a horror book, that's because this isn't. It does have horror elements. The opening here is horror, as is the closing, because this book starts off with Trevor Bentley encountering Jack the Ripper, and surviving that encounter, and then going in pursuit of Jack the Ripper over to America. And Richard Lehman very cleverly integrates the story of what happened to Jack the Ripper, where's he gone. Well, we find out over the course of this book what Richard Lehman believes happens, and it's a theory that many people have since shared. And the ending where Trevor Bentley confronts Jack the Ripper, I'm not going to have spoilers, but that is horror as well. But the main bulk of this is like a coming-of-age drama with a character in pursuit of somebody awful. But Jack the Ripper disappears for most of this book. It's sold as a Jack the Ripper book, but it really isn't. It's a book about self-discovery. And what I loved about some of Lehman's later works, in particular the Travelling Vampire Show, is how he had this... Lehman had this taste for nostalgia. I think he had Peter Pan syndrome, and he wanted to, revisit childhoods and think about what it was like growing up. He did that here better than any other book, but also world built and just tells a genuinely great story. And I mean, this book came out the same year that Endless Night came out, which is Lehman's most messed up book in many ways, just wall-to-wall violence all the way through. And I think Lehman really wanted to push himself and really wanted to craft something different for himself, to write a book that, if everybody else thought all these other books were pulpy nastiness, this would be a book that he considered, a proper novel. And I think that's the case. I think that if you don't like anything else Lehman's wrote, you might enjoy this. If you obviously only want his blood and gore, this isn't the book for you. But in terms of how well written it is, in terms of the story, in terms of the language, in terms of its construction and its craft as telling a story, there isn't a book that Lehman's wrote that's as well written as this, that's as powerful as this. And I put off reading it for a long time, owing to the fact that it wasn't a horror. And I thought, no, I only want to read horror stories. And when I'd read everything else that Lehman had pretty much wrote at that time, I decided to check it out and think, well, what's this one like? And I was just genuinely blown away by how much better a book it was. If I didn't know better, it would be very easy to assume that somebody else wrote this. I know that they didn't because of how Lehman talks about it and how it does contain there are a few Lehmanisms here that you can tell it's here. It's not ghostwritten, and it's got his flow. It's so easy to read. It's definitely Lehman writing it, but it's not the usual thing that Lehman would have wrote, is what I'm trying to say. But I making this list, I thought, do I put In the Dark because I remember it being my number one? Is the B-Sides because it's my favourite horror number one? And I think ultimately no. My number one book for Richard Lehman is going to be a book that I don't think anyone's going to expect because it's his best. And I'm just looking at in terms of purely from an objective point of view, this is his best book, and it's by miles. Okay, it's just there's nothing else he wrote that's as good as a tale or as well written. It's not a horror book, but although it contains horror, but it's absolutely his best book. So I'll wrap it up there. That's Richard Lehman. Savage from 1993, the best book he's ever wrote. My number one pick. And I'll get on to another author soon. Thank you for watching if you've watched. And I hope that anybody who's not discovered Lehman discovers something they enjoy out of this collection. And if you obviously do know Lehman and you've read all of these, then whether you agree or disagree with my rankings, let me know yours and start a conversation. If not, I will have another author very soon. Thank you very much.